Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul, and I'm here with my co-host, my wonderful co-host, Dotsie Couch. Hi, Dotsie.
Hello, hello.
I encourage our listeners to go and join our Facebook page because we listen to what y'all say there, and people have asked us to share what we do in our downtime. So I thought I'd share that today, some of the things that I do when I'm not working or doing things that I have to do, like chores and paying bills and things like that. So,
or eating chocolate.
Eating chocolate. That's very important. That's not downtime. So Dotsie, of course, I do work out at least 6 days a week, usually at least an hour of either swimming or riding the stationary bike. And then on top of that, I do yoga at least 3 times a week, and I lift weights twice a week. But there are 5 things that I do each week that mean a lot to me, that I sort of, they're my touchstones for the week, besides this podcast, of course.
Good sell, girl. Thank you.
So one morning each week, I hike for 2 hours with 2 very close girlfriends, and we start at 6 a.m. We used to start at 5:15, but I guess COVID made my friend Debbie's schedule easier. So now we start at 6, and we just talk about everything during that 2 hours, from politics to family to face creams, and the time goes by really quickly. So that's great. And then one night a week, I volunteer cooking a hot vegan meal for the homeless vets in LA. And this is an offshoot of Food Not Bombs that I've talked about before. A very small group of just 7 of us that are from Food Not Bombs. And actually last week it was just me and my friend Joey cooking for 30, smaller group, 30 vets. And I don't cook at all, and Joey doesn't cook at all, but we made a kick-ass vegan meal of soup and pasta and potatoes, and then we had soy ice cream. And
oh my gosh, how did you guys form that? So as an offshoot, like you said, so the 7 of you put this new crew together, and how did you find the vets and the place where you were going to serve them?
It's not too hard. You drive around LA and you can see the tents on the sidewalk. And this is a group of tents from veterans outside the Veterans Building in West LA. They're not on the property, they're outside the property. And it's probably 50 tents at one time.
Well, where do you cook? Do you cook in your house then, and you drive it to them and set up shop?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Drive it. Yeah. We don't cook in my house because I'm no dummy. I know what a mess it can be. So, but we cook in other folks' houses, and my house is a little out of the way too. So, so that's really great. I love it. I love them. And like the other day, I wasn't feeling very good, but, and I went and I felt so much better. I just felt so much better just being around people and doing something for somebody else. Dotsie, because you do that too in your life. So,
I don't do that, and I'm inspired right now to see what maybe Kirk and I can do in Anaheim, because we have a giant tent city along the riverbed that just seems to be growing daily. And so I just jotted that down. I'll report back. Go ahead.
My recommendation is to actually go there and ask them what they need. And then and then see and just see. They might say, "Oh, we just need, feminine products. We got plenty of food, or we need water, or stuff like that." So, yay! Well, yeah, let us know. So, anyway, the other things I do with Ian, because he's, such a light in my life, that the most important things I do are with him. Once a week, we've been swimming in the ocean up in Malibu, and it's incredible. We do that from June through October, and I just love being outdoors, and it's a workout, but it's also just so invigorating to be out in the early morning, out in nature. So.
Yeah.
And we also like to throw football around too. And I am a pretty darn good thrower. And my sister reminded me, yes, I'm not a very good catcher. And I always tell Ian, don't make me move. But my sister reminded me that when I was a kid, I went to a she and I went to a football clinic for, an afternoon. We were the only girls there. I don't remember it, but she told me after I told her what a good football thrower I am.
I love when we do these because I learned so much about you. That's incredible.
We love it. And we also walk our cats twice a day. I think I might have told you this. It's something that we do together as a family in the morning and in the evening. And our cats, they're brothers. They go in and out, but they like to be with us also. We don't use a leash or anything. We just go out and then we walk along this, it's about a quarter-mile path in front of our homes that goes along, and it's far from the road. And yeah, we do that twice a day, and it's really lovely. And along the way, we talk to our neighbors, and the cats get to look at all the dogs on leashes. And they know the dogs are on leashes, so they don't get too scared of them. Yeah. So. And the last thing that Ian and I do, which I don't know if you know this, Dotsie, but we love doing crosswords. And so we always have a crossword, usually from the New York Times, going. And for those folks who do New York Times crosswords, you know that Monday's the easiest and Saturday is the hardest. And then Sunday's just long. We don't do Sunday because the print's too small. But we have gotten over the years very good at doing Saturday, which is the hardest. But we really need each other. So we have different, educations really. And so together we can do the Saturday New York Times crossword. So every night we do a crossword, and then that's false. Ian generally, it's sort of a signal to start falling asleep 10 minutes, 5 minutes into the crossword. But yeah. So
it's on Amateur Hour. Where do I find, we better start with Monday because we're definitely not Saturday material yet. It's online? Or
yeah, you can go to the New York Times and just sign up. You have to pay for the crossword, and I don't know how much it is because Ian paid for it. But and I think you can actually go into the archives for free and get the crosswords. And we started it about 10 years ago, maybe even more, for our brains. To keep our brains active.
Yeah.
And now we have to start doing playing a musical instrument, because that's supposed to be even better for your brain. I think we learned that from talking to some of our guests about the brain and diet and activities, lifestyle. But the crossword certainly can't hurt, and it certainly has broadened our knowledge of very trivial things.
Yeah, and your vocabulary, big time.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's amazing. All right, we'll start with archives. On Mondays.
It's really fun. It's something to do with, you could do it with Kirk. But anyway, so let's get on to our guest today, who is also an explorer, and I'm very interested to hear what she does in her downtime, right?
She's really interesting. She's an adventurer for sure. And I'll just go ahead and admit, we interviewed her and I lost the video. So this is round 2.
You didn't lose it, Dotsie. It's just that you had so much information on your computer that it didn't record properly.
This is correct. So this is our first time at seeing if round 2 can be better than round 1. So yeah, let's dive in. I'm really looking forward to round 2 with Calen Otto. Our guest today has crossed the country twice with just a $300 gift card in her pocket and a bike. She's been to 5 continents, worked on an animal sanctuary property, documented conditions at more than 15 farms, participated in countless protests and vigils, and runs a vegan travel blog and podcast. Oh, and she's only 25 years old. Calen Otto is the unruly traveler, And I'd say she's more experienced than most 40-year-olds, particularly when it comes to traveling on a budget. We are so energized by her passion for travel and activism, and we can't wait to hear all about it. So welcome to the Switch for Good podcast, Calen.
Yay! Thank you for having me. That was such a fun intro.
Oh, well, it's your life. You're gonna fill in all the blanks. I'd love to just start with adventure, because that is going to be one of our themes for today's episode. And of course, I have to start with the bike. So, at 19 years old, right, you decided to bike across the country. Talk to us about what prompted you and what inspired you to want to do that at such a young age and on a bicycle, because that wasn't easy. I haven't biked across the country.
Yeah, and I won't be doing it again.
Okay, there you go.
Well, let me think. I have to go back a little bit before that, because, I graduated high school and everyone else kind of knew what they wanted to do. They were going to college or whatever. And I had no idea. And I was in shock that people knew what they wanted to do, because I didn't. I think the only part of my identity at that point was that I was like vegetarian. Everyone kind of thought I was this weird hippie, and that was it. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with that? And then at the last minute, my mom was like, why don't you be an exchange student? Because our family friend had done it, and I was interested in travel, but I hadn't really gone anywhere before, except family vacations. And so I applied at last minute to spend a year abroad off a whim. I was just like, sure. I had no idea what it would entail. I didn't even know the countries that I was applying for. I did not know what I was doing. And I got in the program. And so I went abroad to Chile for a year. And while I was there, I was running. At the very end of my year, I would always go on runs, because it was like my time to be with myself and collect myself. And I stepped off the pavement wrong, and I broke my foot. And I hid it from my host family. I just limped around and pretend like I wasn't limping in front of them. I didn't know my foot was broken until I came back to the US, because I knew if they knew that I had done that, they wouldn't let me out of the house again, and I needed my freedom. So I hid it from them. And then I came back to the US. I went to yoga school. It was I was working with my foot. My foot was healing, but it wasn't in perfect condition. And by the time I was done, the travel bug had hit me again. But my mom was like, your foot looks funny. This shows how young I was. I was just ignoring it. She's like, your foot looks funny. Let's take you to the doctors. So she took me to the doctors. They put me in a boot again, like a walking cast, basically. And so all the teaching that I was doing with yoga, I couldn't teach anymore. So basically, I didn't know about working online yet. So basically, I was out of a job with no savings, and I was at home, and the travel bug hit me. And it seemed like the worst time to do it. And I can't remember the political climate then, but I was starting to just learn more about the world, and I was starting to feel really down about it. And I went to this yoga collective thing, and people were talking about their dreams, and I was like, I have the travel bug. I want to travel across the US, but I don't have any money. And someone just mentioned, oh, this woman did it, and she just worked as she went. And I always like to say, I never looked her up. I don't know if that was real. I'm sure someone has, but I never searched for her. And I decided that's what I was going to do. So I think it was really to see if I could make things happen, if I could go on this big adventure, and if I could be independent and put myself to the test. And I needed a change of setting. It was really hard being abroad for a year and finally learning how to travel, and then coming back home and not being able to do anything.
So you traveled with your bike, is that right, with $300, and you worked along the way. Share with us some of the work that you did that helped you get through this across the country.
Yeah, so again, I really didn't know what I was doing. I just did some Googling before I left. And I saw there were a couple programs to kind of help you with this. So I started this adventure it's called woofing, where you work on an organic farm. And they give you food, and you trade so many hours for work, and they give you a place to stay. So that's like a formal, agreement, work trade agreement, which I did a couple times. But basically, I would bike into town, And my mom gave me the $300 gift card, by the way. She was like, you have to take this at the last minute. She like gave me her scary mom look and she's like, you have to take this. Um, and so, yeah, I would bike around and then I'd go ask to work for food and or ask to work, for cash. And so I would go into
like at stores or at people's homes, or you just started knocking on doors?
I would go to like restaurants. I would start at restaurants and then sometimes it would lead to other jobs because they would let me. I like swept the parking lot, crushed boxes, cleaned. And then I remember one time I walked into a furniture store, I cleaned the whole store and they paid me in cash. One time I walked into a restaurant and it didn't have work for me, but the woman who owned its brother's maid was out of town. And so I went to this guy's house for like almost a week and I took care of his kid and I cleaned his house and I got free food from the restaurant. I mean, it wasn't the safest thing, but I was doing all types of jobs, just, living with people and taking care of things that no one really wanted to do for them.
Didn't you cut your hair and do some nude modeling?
Oh, I did the nude modeling before I left through art museums. They do the life drawing classes. And I cut my hair later when I went to Thailand. That was about a year or two ago now. But these are like tricks I've learned after the trip that I wish I would have done during it. But yeah, if you cut your hair, you can get a lot of money. And nude modeling pays really well too. So those are things that I,
note to self.
Great,
okay.
I picked up later, just in case.
What about some of the work that you did work, Dotsie mentioned, at a sanctuary and other work that you did for animals?
Yeah, so during that bike trip, I was vegan and then I had been slowly getting into activism. So when I would cross the country, I would do, animal rights demonstrations. I would search vegan groups on Facebook. So that when I was like kind of getting into my activism more, I wasn't as hardcore as I am now. And so after that trip, it was years after, I did end up at the ALC. I met another vegan who owned a sanctuary in North Carolina, and I bought a van and moved onto her sanctuary and worked there for about a year and a half. But during that initial trip, it was just more protesting. And then later on, it became more about animals.
So how is it, you said you were vegan, how is it to be vegan and travel, especially, and on top of that, on a budget? A lot of people will say, oh, veganism, it's so expensive to eat plant-based. And then the other excuse people have is, I just travel too much, or when I travel, everything goes to heck in a handbasket.
Yeah.
So you combine both of those things and were able to remain vegan on a budget traveling.
Yeah, I mean, that was an extreme budget because most of the time I had little cash in my pocket and I was just working as I went, like going in a pizza shop and doing work, and then I could eat from their salad bar and things like that. And I was in a lot of rural places in the US. So a lot of people, it's very different today. I know that not that much time has gone by, but the vegan food landscape is very different. Now we have all these different cheeses and mock meats and things like that. And at that time, I would say that I'm vegan and people would say, vegan? What's that? Here's fish, here's gluten-free bread. So I like to tell people it's not expensive. Like eating a plant-based diet is actually less expensive. Your food doesn't go as bad as fast. It's easier to travel with vegan food. And almost anywhere you go, and I would like to say almost anywhere you go in the world, there's vegetables, fruit, grains, pasta, legumes, things like that. So the being vegan was never an issue. And at this point, I've been to 5 continents on a budget as a vegan, and it's never been difficult. And I've met vegans in every single place. So yeah, that excuse doesn't make sense to me anymore. And I think that people don't realize it. And if you go into it thinking there's nothing for me, there's nothing for me, I think you are going to have a hard time. But if you go into it saying, I'm looking for the basics, you're going to be able to find those almost anywhere in the world.
Yeah. You've actually put together a vegan travel guide for folks on a budget. So you are an expert, and we'll put in the show notes where people can find that. And I know Alexandra and I both appreciate that you begin that travel guide by stating your point of view is that of a white woman, which means that your experiences on the road might be different from other people. How does it offer you, and how did it offer you, advantages and disadvantages, and were you surprised?
Yeah, so I wasn't aware of these social factors back when I did this bike trip, but over the years I've definitely learned a lot. And you're right, I do begin that travel guide by saying like I'm a white person, and I identify as non-binary, but that's not something that's very visible with me. Like I'm a queer person, but people think that I look very feminine. So that doesn't really impact me as much as it does maybe trans folks or other people who don't look so conforming to whatever gender norm society places on them. Um, so for me, I think the thing that impacted me most was traveling as a female. And it's so interesting because I would hear before I go, every time actually I go on a trip by myself, especially to another country and especially the one across the US where I was alone on my bike, I would hear, "Oh, you're going to get sexually assaulted, you're going to get taken advantage of. You can't do it. You can't do it as a female alone." And then someone even told me, "You're too pretty to do it alone. Everyone's going to take advantage of you." And women would tell me this actually. And then I remember meeting this man during the bike trip, and he told me, "Well, you can only do this because you're a female. You can only do this because of how you look." So everyone sort of has their own ideas as to why you can or can't do something. And I really think everyone, because of your gender, your race, your age, your class, plays into these privileges you're going to have while you're traveling. So for me, I found that people maybe felt more comfortable around me because I was a female. If you saw a hitchhiker that was me versus a grown man, you would probably feel more comfortable picking me up. But then at the same time, I felt more vulnerable. Like, females know don't walk alone at night. So all these things, they can help or hurt you. And it's just everyone's so different. You're going to have your own combination of how to.
You seem like you have such a curious discovery rooted personality. And you've been to 5 continents, and you've been across the country, as I mentioned, on a bike with just $300 to start. Where does that bug come from inside of you? And is it still like, on fire today? And how are you making that become a reality in the midst of still dealing with this pandemic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, it is still on fire inside of me, and I think that it wasn't until I was an exchange student for that year. And even though that was one of the hardest years of my life, like being in a new place, not speaking the language, living with a host family that doesn't speak English, all of these different things, um, I realized how much I was learning. Like I haven't gone to college, and I've done all these very alternative things. And I feel like I have learned so much that it really just blows my mind. So I think the learning aspect and meeting all these new people who are not like me and are opening my views to all these new things really like caught inside of me. And I'm like, "Oh, I always want this." It like gives me life. It gives me energy. So during the pandemic, of course, I haven't been doing that. I only did one trip. And so finishing my travel guide and getting it published was a really good way for me to relive these stories and
Yeah.
still feel like I'm engaging with travel, even though I'm not really going anywhere. And I do like to do local adventures and go find waterfalls and swimming holes and all of that. So it's not the same these days, but I am eager to get back out there.
You mentioned about being queer. Can you tell our audience, because I think some listeners, especially older listeners,
Mhm.
might, and our audience watchers too, because we're on YouTube also, they might not understand what that means when you say I'm queer and non-binary and all that. Can you
Yeah.
clarify a little bit?
Yeah, so I think the basics with that people don't understand that your sex and your gender are two different things. Um, and whatever, genitalia you're born with does not need to indicate your gender. So when we're born and someone's a female, they say, "Oh, it's a little girl." And, whatever, people identify you with all these things. Then you like pink and you're supposed to play with Barbies and all of these things. And so non-binary people, like me, obviously have different reasons for being non-binary. But for me, I'm just saying I don't identify with any of the gender norms that are presented and that are popular today. And I feel like I'm on a spectrum. Like sometimes I feel more masculine, sometimes I feel more feminine, sometimes I don't feel like either. So for me, I feel more comfortable with they them pronouns. And then of course, queer is like this umbrella, and people may fall under the spectrum, like trans folks, non-binary people. So it's just this word to basically say you're not conforming with your gender. And then there's all these specific pockets that people fall into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's starting to. Your sex is your body part that you were born with. And
Right.
then your gender could be of your choosing. Gender neutral. Does that mean what you were saying, where you could feel more female some days, more male other days, somewhere in between? Or is that something different where it's just like I'm kind of always feeling gender neutral?
Well, I
Like,
think
would you identify with that, or?
Yeah, I identify with gender neutral because I don't usually feel like internally, I don't feel like I fall into one of those social constructs. But I do feel like on a sliding scale. So it's really the person. Like someone could say I'm gender neutral and they could feel this one day and that the other day, or someone could say I'm gender neutral and they'll be like, I am never any of this.
Okay. Okay. So it's you, as far as love and relationships go, you just like human beings, and it could really be any of the genders or sexes, right? Like it's just,
Yeah. So your gender then affects what you would refer to yourself as sexually. So, a cis person who identifies with the gender assigned to them at birth because of their genitalia would say that they're straight. I would not say that I'm straight because I don't identify with being like a cis person. I don't identify as a woman, with the female parts that I was born with. So I identify as pansexual, which basically means I like anyone. So yeah, your gender does impact what you call yourself in terms of sexuality.
Mm-hmm. And what is that experience like? Either on the road, I mean, you touched on it a bit, that it's you, the way people view you and see you is what people would classify in society as a certain gender, so they're not looking at you and going, oh, you're different. But nonetheless, if you were really getting to know people and experiencing different people in your travels, and they experiencing you, they learn these traits. And what was that like? Were people kind and open and loving and interested, or not?
It's really a whole spectrum. I mean, it's the weirdest thing. It's kind of like with any other social political aspect. You really truly never know who's going to take it well and who's not going to. Like I've been surprised who takes wearing a mask well and who doesn't. I've been surprised who takes using the correct pronouns, or you know what I mean, treating me as such. I've been very surprised because some people get it, and some people are so stuck, like there is man and woman, and God made man and woman, and women like men and men like women. So it's been interesting, and I will say that, as you probably know, like when I'm with vegans, I feel comfortable, but then on top of that, when I'm with queer vegans, I feel so comfortable. So it's really helped me during my travels. Like if I find the queer vegans, I know I'm good to go. I'm going to be jiving with these people and I'm going to have the time of my life.
Does queer mean anything other than the cis man loving the cis woman, or the cis woman loving the cis man? Could it be anything more than that? It just means...
Yeah, it just basically means that you don't conform to gender standards. So whatever social construct is your gender at the time, it just means that you don't conform
or
to
sexual standards too.
Yeah, right? Or sexual standards. You don't conform to the basically cis hetero patriarchy norm of how relationships are supposed to go. Yeah, it's basically like you don't identify with that, or you might in some ways, but you don't abide by those rules.
Could you explain the they them? Because I never understood why it has to be they them and not just they. Like, do some people are some people they her?
That's a good question. Some people, if you see it written, will say she, they, and that means I go by she, her, or they, them. Okay. So some people feel more comfortable with both of those, but...
Got it. Thank you. I wish that there was another pronoun, but being a cisgender cisgender, female, straight, female, white. I don't really want to have a say in this, but I would like to discuss it with you.
Yeah.
I wish there was another word like I think they tried Z, and Zer, Z-I-R, is that right? And because they then makes it, I had a friend telling me, she was talking about her boyfriend, but I didn't realize her boyfriend went by they, them pronouns. So I kept thinking it was a group of people she was talking about, and she was just talking about her boyfriend. So I'm wondering do you have any idea where the language is going, Calen? And in other countries, do they do they, them, or are there specific words? It'd be nice to have a universal word, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would be amazing.
Can you with all your travels? Can you do that?
Yeah, I would feel my stress levels go like this if that was a thing. Yeah, so I think that they, them was just, I don't know the whole history of it, but it seems like it's the most accessible because people do use Zer. But then you have people saying, well, those are weird words. I'm never going to use that. That's too weird. So you say, okay, I'll use a word that you know. So I use they, them, we'll use that word because it can be a singular person and people go, that's too confusing. You can't use that. And you say, well, if I can't make up a word and I can't use this word, what am I supposed to use? So that's why I think that it's hard for people. And in other cultures, in other countries, and if you go back in history, like Native American people would just have one word for like a living being. Certain tribes wouldn't say she, her. It would just be, when you refer to this person or thing, are they living, are they not? So other countries do that. I think in German, they have a little bit different. I think that they, have a word which is gender neutral and it's more normalized, but it all depends on the culture and kind of, how forward thinking they are with gender at the moment.
Yeah. Well, when did this come clear for you in your own life?
I think it was a little bit after that bike trip. I actually had a non-binary roommate who uses they, them pronouns. And I was thinking, that's interesting. I've kind of always felt like this person feels. I just didn't know the language. And I was doing a meditation and it hit me all of a sudden, like almost like a bolt of lightning in the head. Like, oh my gosh, that's me too. And I would feel so much more comfortable with that. And I came out of that meditation and I remember trying not to say anything because I'm like, oh, it's just going to be too hard. Because I kind of saw the struggles that my roommate went through. And eventually I just couldn't ignore it anymore. I was like, you know what? Let's just add it on. Let's just see how it goes. And after I said that, I just couldn't go away from it because it's how I feel most comfortable.
Good for you.
You have a podcast.
Yes, I do have a podcast.
And you interview people whom you've met on your travels in that podcast. Are there any people that you've met who you think would inspire our audience to get them, to hear about other vegans or other people in this big wide world?
Yeah, so the podcast has such an array of topics. It's called the Unruly Podcast. So, if you have this kind of non-conforming alternative lifestyle, you're a great guest for the podcast. And a lot of those people end up...
you and I cannot be guests.
Oh no, I would say you'd be great guests. I've seen Dotsie talk to the dairy committee.
Yeah, we may not be queer, but we are definitely swimming upstream as far as general mainstream society.
And I've seen your activism, Alexandra, so you two are perfect. You make the
real deal.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the people on there end up being vegans. And if you go back through there, I mean, we cover so many different topics like how to hitchhike, how to couch surf, to how to, shave your head and make money from it, why you did that. And then we explore gender and sexuality, and I tell tales of like my traveling in different countries. So if listeners go through, the titles are pretty unique and they'll give you a really good clue as to what the episode's going to be about. And yeah, I've just had some really great conversations with vegan along the way. And actually my first episode was at the Animal Liberation Conference back in 2018, 17 maybe. And I spoke with Juliana Perry about how she rescued her dog from China and how she got arrested in China and went to jail and all of that. So that was a great kickoff to the podcast, and that's the very, very first episode. So that one's pretty inspiring.
Oh yeah, she's a friend of mine, and she led my first, no, not my first open rescue, but I was on a team that she led when we rescued a calf. So she's definitely a cool person. Well, tell us hitchhiking. Okay, so I grew up in the 60s and 70s where there were many more hitchhikers, and now it's considered super dangerous to hitchhike. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I feel jealous in that way because I talk to some travelers now that are older than me. Especially I have this friend, he's almost 80 years old, and I met him traveling. He kind of became my adopted grandpa, and he told me all these stories of hitchhiking. He was actually the first one who encouraged me to do it, and he was telling me all these tales from back in the day. So I'm kind of jealous that that was more popular. When you were there in the 60s and but yeah, today I feel like it is more dangerous because it's not as normally as accepted. And again, your race and your gender and your class play into it so much. So, for me, I feel like it's dangerous because I could be taken advantage of. Someone might not let me back out of the car, something like that. But for other people of color, I mean, the level skyrockets. You can look up the statistics, and their danger in hitchhiking goes way up. So you really do have to be mindful of those things. I've never had any terrible experiences hitchhiking. I've had uncomfortable ones where it really freaked me out, like this person's starting to act weird, but nothing bad ever came of it. And I will mention, every time I've hitchhiked, it's been a man who's picked me up, and most of the time, I've done it a few times with friends, but most of the time it's been me, and I've been safe so far. But I do like to take precautions. Like, I like to have my phone on me. I tell someone I'm doing it first. I get the license plate number. I put on my location so my friends can see where I am. I tell the driver, I'm sending your license plate to my friends. And, someone knows if I don't text you by this or call you by this, you need to check in on me. So yeah, in my guide, I go through all these things that are if you're going to hitchhike, please do all of these things so that you can be as safe as possible.
That location setting too on your phone is spot on, right?
Yeah. For that.
Don't get away from that.
Yeah.
You're a woman of so many interests and so many facets, and just at only 25 years old, you've gone to over 15 factory farms or small farms to document conditions or to rescue animals. I know you have so many stories, and so many of them, broke your heart. You did a rescue. I remember you telling us last time, because I admitted in our intro that we did this before, and then I lost the video, but a rescue of over 400 birds that I think you did last year. That was just a riveting story and experience, and I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't too long ago. I feel like I put it back in my memory that I got a call, and I like to point out that this is by just friends. This is not some big organization, because I like to tell people you can do this too. This is like a grassroots thing. By friends, that there was a factory farm that was hit by a tornado, and it was a chicken farm, and I know that they used them for meat, but there was also eggs on the farm that we saw. So that confused me a little bit. But anyway, the people had left all of the birds in the wreckage. I mean, with no food or water. And multiple groups, before I even got called about this, had approached the farm and asked if they could just take the birds. Because obviously they couldn't sell them for meat at that point. They had been through a tornado. A lot of them were injured. And they left them there for weeks. They left them there for weeks without food or water. So these birds were drinking dirty rainwater. They literally had maggots eating their bodies. And then when a bird would die because of, exhaustion, they weren't protected from the elements, dehydration, whatever, starvation, they would actually start eating each other's bodies or picking the maggots out of them. So yeah, we made multiple trips to that farm, during the night, because obviously the farmers would not like that, and it's very illegal. And we ended up rescuing. I mean, I called up friends who had never done an animal rescue before. And I was like, we have to get over there now if we're going to do this. And we rescued over 400 birds, but that was like hell on earth. I mean, just to see these birds with maggots eating them alive, and it was infuriating for me to know that multiple people from different groups had reached out and said, "Hey, we'll take these birds for you free of charge. We'll pay for vet care. We'll give them a lifelong, life that's good." And the farmers said no, and they were very defensive, and they were very protective, and they were telling the public, I remember, that there was no birds left. But every night I would go back and there were hundreds of birds. And so, all these, even some vegan groups came and said, we'll rescue the animals. And they told them, no, there's no birds left. But then that evening I would go and there were hundreds of birds. So, we rescued around 400 birds, but that wasn't all of them. We just couldn't go back the last night because we were kind of pushing our luck. And I think the farmer was kind of catching on to what was happening. So
I would think after 400 birds disappear, a farmer would notice. Maybe not,
right?
Judging how the farmer didn't pay much attention to them. How did you house that? One of the big issues with rescue is finding forever homes for the rescued.
Yeah. Well, we luckily knew a sanctuary owner who had room just to keep them for a little bit. And there was this really awesome network of people all over the US. I mean, these birds were transported from coast to coast. So it took a lot of time, energy, and money, because the thing was, you didn't just rescue them and then you were done. You then needed to take care of them. You needed to transport them states and states away. So yeah, it was this one person holding them until we were able to make a really long drive and take them somewhere else. So it was multiple days of no sleep, and yeah, a lot of heartbreak. And I always remember this one bird. She had so many maggots on her body, and we were picking birds to take, and it was really hard because you had to choose. We knew we only had so much room and so much time before the sun comes up. And I could tell she was almost dead, but I don't know. There was something about her. I really wanted to take her. I was like, oh, like, I don't know. And I remember I picked her up, and she was like, we had to pull her. They were stuck between like slats of wood because the building had fallen down. So some of them were trapped, and we were having to move stuff, and we couldn't get to some of them just because it was too heavy. And she was stuck, and we were pulling on her, and I knew it was hurting her, all of these things. And then I remember I just stopped in all the chaos and sat with her, and I just held her because I could tell she was fighting for something, but I knew she wasn't going to make it. And I remember like just sitting down in the gross water with the maggots and everything going on around us. And I was just like, it's okay. Like, you can die now. She was in such bad shape. And in about a minute, she looked into my eyes and she died. And I just feel like sometimes they're, I don't know, waiting for a moment. I mean, like, how would we like to die? Would we rather do it in this miserable place, or would we rather do it against a warm body in someone's arms? So yeah, over the years of rescue, there've just been some moments where I feel like, wow, like, even if this animal didn't live, at least they had this death that's a little bit nicer. But it just still enrages me that that's even, a thing, like a choice for us to make about their lives, because it's their life. So yeah, that was a really difficult rescue. It was really emotional and very infuriating.
Thank you for sitting with her and just being there and just looking into her eyes. And it's probably the only moment of kindness that she'd had from a human in her whole life.
Yeah, I really think it was. I mean, I just felt her whole body relax, and then, that was it.
You also rescued 2 pigs from a factory farm. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this story, I know it might be a little woo-woo for the audience, but
we've got some woo-woos listening. It's okay.
We need more woo-woo. We need more queer. We need more.
Awesome.
Your stuff, Calen. So go for it.
Okay. Perfect. So yeah, in North Carolina, Hurricane Florence hit years ago. And again, it was me and my friends. We have no idea what we were doing. And we went out, got trapped in where the hurricane was hit. And it hit really hard in Duplin County, which is like hog capital of the USA. It has one of the largest slaughterhouses in the world for pigs. There's a pig farm about every couple miles. I mean, I don't even know how many pigs are in North Carolina, but that concentrated area blows my mind. You just smell the death when you go there. I mean, if you're in a county, you know you're there. So, anyways, the pigs in the CAFOs were flooding out sometimes because farmers left them, or they would trap them inside and they would drown in the barns because farmers got more insurance money. Um, but we ended up going to a factory farm before the water levels rose there, and we were walking down the aisles and we were just doing it to document. Like it wasn't supposed to be, we're taking these animals right now. Um, and so the farmers had abandoned the pigs. They had gone to higher ground, maybe to another state, and left no food or water for the animals in the CAFOs. So this was a CAFO where there were smaller pigs um, who weren't full grown yet. And there were two of them that had gotten outside of the bars and kind of came onto the middle walkway. And so again, I was like, oh my gosh, they're almost dead. I can't, we can't leave them here to die on the floor. Like they were so um like starved and dehydrated, and they were looking. I remember the one couldn't even pick her head, but she was looking at me. And I was like, oh my gosh. She's like looked into her eyes. We have to take them. So we took the two of them. So the one was, hardly had any energy. She couldn't even lift her head to eat or drink. So, we were lifting her head for her. We were bottle feeding her. We were scooping things into her mouth. She couldn't even chew, you know. Um, that's how out of it she was. And I was like, at times I couldn't tell if she was alive or dead. And the other one could get up and walk around. He was really sick. He had gashes all over him, but he could get up and walk around. So, we took them to a friend's house, and we put them in these little cat boxes right next to each other. And they had been on opposite sides of the barn, mind you. So they had never come close to each other because they couldn't walk that much. And we could just tell that they loved each other. And they looked very distinct from each other. So we knew who was who. And I remember that the one was up walking around before we went to bed. And the other one, we're like, I don't know if she's going to make it. People took shifts to come in and check on her. And everyone just thought she's going to be dead. I swear to you, we came out in the morning to check on them. The one had gotten in, the one who was walking around got in the box with the other piglet, was nuzzled up to her. He was dead in the morning. And the one who couldn't lift her head got up and started walking around. And I swear to you that I feel like he got in there, he gave her his energy, because this was a piglet who I was like checking her pulse because she couldn't even open her eyes and lift up her head. And she was walking around the next morning. And I was like, what just, I mean, we were all blown away. There were people with me who are way less woo-woo than me who said, this definitely happened and I can't believe it happened. And I just think it shows just how much of people they are. And the one pig, she actually lived for a few years, and then she had medical problems we couldn't put our finger on, because a lot of pigs that are, raised in the industry do. And she lived a few years on a sanctuary, and then she died. But that, I remember just sitting in there and crying, because I was like, they did this on purpose. Like, how did this happen? This had to be an energy exchange.
You include topics like human rights on your blog, and obviously we're talking about animal rights. And what have your travels taught you, or that all of your experiences that you've had on these over 15 different farms, about how humans and animals are related and how they're treated?
I mean, there's so many connections, and my attitude towards myself and the planet has changed since going vegan and traveling and going into farms. Because I consider other animals people. I mean, they're not human. We are animals, and they're different species of animals. And I know that just because I can't understand someone when I go to another country doesn't mean they're not human or they're less human than me. As I know, if I go into a farm and pigs don't speak English, but that doesn't make them any less of a person. So I think that's something I've learned over the years, and I've seen how if we can other ourselves from someone, whether it be a human or an animal, we can justify all the violence. And I've also learned that we do things to make ourselves feel better. Like we say they were grass fed, or they had a humane slaughter, or different things like that. Because most of the farms that I have gone into have been small, locally owned family dairy farms. And those have been some of the worst places I've been to. So I've seen how we've created these labels to kind of make ourselves feel better. But I think that when you do connect with animals and humans all over the world, at some point it gets hard to do that. And you don't do that anymore as much. I mean, there's a lot of social conditioning, but you start to undo it, and it just makes you a better person for everyone, I think.
Mm-hmm. As you were saying that the bit about, you know, the terms that we use, that animal agriculture has very specifically and sadistically, in my opinion, placed on the experience that we are, as the consumer, are going to have with the animals on the other end of their death. And they know full well, I think, the general goodness of people's hearts, and that they want to do the right thing. And they use that for you to make you feel better about buying their product. And we know that there really are no regulations on the use of most of these words, nor are there checks that the USDA does to ensure everything from, you know, grass-fed to naturally raised to organic to I'm waiting for them to come out like, you know, massaged with lavender before slaughter.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, it's just all, I just wish people knew more, because we all know so many, you know, good hearted people that are paying way more money for all of these products, with the, you know, quote, you know, it's just animal washing, you know, what would the term be called, right?
Green washing, washing.
There you go. To put it on our plates at a higher price. Mm-hmm. And it's just that part of it is just it's so twisted, because it's very specifically using the goodness of humans and using human psychology for you know, a bigger profit, when it's the same, right? Like maybe they're in a barn and they have like a little tiny door that 5 of them can get out of, and you know, that's pasture raised. And you know, when you tell people the truth, it's hard for them to even wrap their head around that that's the truth, because they don't really believe that they would be lied to. You know, you just think, no, like our government is like protecting us, and it includes our food system, and you know, that just can't be. And it certainly is.
I think once you start to undo that mindset, our government is protecting us, then you can open your eyes, because I don't think that. I mean, I think the government is protecting you if you are very rich. Obviously, if it leans in your favor if you're white, if you're cis, all these things. But yeah, we have to remember that they are looking to make a profit too. And it really infuriates me, especially with like Whole Foods, because people go there and they think they're getting the pasture raised, blah, 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 humane, cage free. And Alexandra, you probably know this because I've gone on to some of their farms with DXC, and I think that you probably have too. But that's also like this class things comes into it, where they're like, well, we're able to afford this type of meat, so we're doing better. And then other
people you can't do better. That.
But those people are not doing better. They're just spending more money. It's so twisted in so many ways. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere where you've traveled to 5 continents and you've been to many countries? Is there any country that you feel is treating anywhere near treating animals well, or protecting them in a way that gives them real rights? Because in the United States, we don't do that unless they're cats and dogs. That's pretty much the only class of non-human animal that has any kind of right, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen other animals here that do. And, you know, I can't think of a specific country. I mean, different ones are kind of moving forward with different laws, maybe to give them, say, they have sentience.
Yeah, that's true. Like Sweden, I think, or it's maybe Sweden that you can't have a fish in a fishbowl.
Yeah, there's things like that are kind of random that are progressing. but there's not one country that I feel like, oh, they really have it. The only places in the world where that is happening is on animal sanctuaries, which can be found in maybe every country. You know, I obviously haven't been to every country, but a lot of countries do have animal sanctuaries that are vegan, and that's the only place where I can say, you're pushing society forward. You've got this down. This is like a safe place for all of us.
Yeah. You do some work with one of my favorite people on planet Earth, Ashley Katz, at Mothers Against Dairy. And I know we've spoken about Mothers Against Dairy on this podcast, but I think it's been a really long time. And for some of our new listeners, just want them to know that that organization exists, what they do. And I would love to learn what you're working on now with Ashley at Mothers Against Dairy. And then how can people get involved?
Yeah, so I actually work with Ashley on Milk Hurts and Mothers Against Dairy. Awesome. So it's great for people to know, you can find you can find both of those organizations on all the social media. And at Mothers Against Dairy, people can go and submit stories, that relate their own, human motherhood to those of the dairy industry. A lot of vegan moms go on and share stories, and it helps kind of pull other moms in and make that connection, which is really special. Ashley is a genius. She's amazing. And then with Milk Hurts, we've been working on we're hoping to get people in Asheville, around where we live, that serve dairy products to switch over to plant-based options. And, I've gone to all these farms now, and a lot of them are local to here. And we want to be able to say, hey, here's the documentation, here's the practices that they do. And a lot of times that's just public information. If you email them and ask, they'll tell you. We want to approach people and through those organizations, get them to switch over to all plant milk, and, they'll know the ethics behind it. Because a lot of people say, well, we get from this local farm. So we want to say, oh, we've been there and we've talked to them and this is what they do.
Right.
To move them in that direction. So both of those organizations are awesome. And I hope people check them out.
So Calen, what's next for you?
Well, my book is finally published, so that's big.
Yes. So this is the vegan travel guide.
Yes, it's called The Art of Unruly Travel on a Budget, and it's finally published. The printed copies are in the mail. People can get the ebook now. So the next step is kind of getting this out there, spreading the word, learning how to be an author that sells books. So that's big. And then, I'm always doing things with my podcast, interviewing new guests. And I actually, a podcast got handed over to me called Sanctuary Tour, where we interview sanctuaries, vegan sanctuaries, around the USA. So that's a new project I've taken on, and we've already done some episodes. And I'm hoping to travel to Central America for a couple months in the winter. So that would be the next big thing. Where I'd get to do more podcasts and sell the book and add more to my blog and more tips and all of those things. But we'll see how that goes with COVID.
I'm so excited for your book. You know what we want to do? Switch for Good wants to buy 10 of your books and give them away to our listeners. And all people have to do to listen to this episode is just email us, info@switchforgood, and tell us the one thing that you love the most that you learned from Calen and your address, and we will send you the book.
Oh my God, that's so sweet.
I want to get it out there.
A little bit.
No, I just love you, and I just thought, gosh, how do I just in the tiniest way be able to just support and raise up and lift what you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much.
Little steps.
I'm also interested to hear what people's favorite things were.
Yes, we're going to share it with Calens, so be kind, people. Yeah, of course, right?
Well, there's going to be a lot of nude modeling going on.
I know, cutting the hair and the nude modeling.
Yeah. Calen, for someone who left high school not knowing what she wanted to do, you are a young woman full of purpose, with so much to do in your life. It's very impressive. When you go to your 10-year reunion, I have a feeling that you're going to have a lot of purpose and knowing, and experiences to share with your classmates who thought they knew what they wanted to do when they were 18. You found it a little later, but you found it, and it's obviously makes you shine.
Thank you so much. That's, I've seen some of my high school friends, and I think they all think I'm really weird. but at least I think they can say, wow, this person has a lot of fun. So
yeah. And a lot of non-binary cojones. I think you're really bold.
Yes.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.